Ready. Play.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever in the world you are tuning in from and whatever time it happens to be there. I'm really pleased to have with me once again Steve Flink. It's been actually not that long. About 4 or 5 weeks ago we spoke, and I looked forward to speaking to him in the new year. But then suddenly a few days ago I thought, who better to speak to preview the men's singles final than Mr. Flink himself. Steve, how are you doing today?
Doing fine, John. It's been an interesting tournament. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. But I was not anticipating this final. Were you?
No, I wasn't. And you can probably guess at least half of the two members of the final I wasn't anticipating, and maybe even both, given the draw. But yes, there is an absent player that we normally look at the Australian Open men's final from, and certainly when he gets to the semi-finals anyway, he wins, and he's won all 10 of his previous semi-finals that he's reached in Australia, but not yesterday. And of course that is Novak Djokovic. I say yesterday, I'm not quite sure what time zone or even what day it is anymore because of 2 weeks of us action in Australia. But I'd like to get your take on that match between Djokovic and Sinner.
Yeah.
Did Sinner win it or did Djokovic lose it, Steve?
I think it was more that Djokovic lost it, frankly. I mean, and it's not fair. You can't be critical of Sinner in any way because he played superbly from start to finish. So it's not a knock on him. But those first two sets that Djokovic lost 6-1, 6-2 were about as abysmally as I've seen him play ever in a big match, certainly over the last 10 years or 15 years even. And he said it himself. He thought it was maybe the worst Grand Slam match he could remember himself. And yet he did laud Sinner for the level of his game and how well he was striking the ball and the precision of his serve. I mean, there were a lot of things that Jannik did beautifully, but the Djokovic that we were watching over the first two sets that he lost 1 and 2, where he got broken 4 times and never came near to breaking Sinner, was just it. I mean, yes, he had struggled throughout the tournament in various matches. He'd lost 3 sets. He dropped a set to Fritz, but it was nothing like this. He just could not find his range off the ground. He couldn't find a way to extend the rallies and get into some kind of rhythmic state, and where he could test Sinner, where he could make that. Finally happened a bit later in the 3rd set, but that was too late. I don't think he had it in him, feeling the way he did after all the wear and tear of the tournament, to feel like he was going to have a miraculous comeback from 2 sets to love in him. So what I'm basically saying is I think he spotted Sinner those first 2 sets. He didn't challenge him those first 2 sets, and Sinner exploited it to the hilt. Then we saw in the 3rd, John, that Novak made his move. He was down break point early. That set, it could have ended up being a 1-2-4 obliteration, but he saved himself and then started serving quite well the rest of the set. And in the process, started to extend some of the rallies. We saw some 14, 18, 20-stroke rallies, more Djokovic-like. And finally, Sinner did start to miss a bit because he was being extended in the rallies, which didn't happen early. I think Novak had no patience earlier. So, and then, of course, the tiebreak, where Novak saved a match point. It was a very good forceful forehand return from Sinner, but Novak fended it off and then managed to coax an error off of the Sinner forehand, and then he pulled the tiebreak out. Did a little fist pump, but again, even that was not the typical animated Novak. He was so subdued the entire time. It was as if somehow in the back of his mind, he thought everything had caught up to him and he just didn't have it in him. The spark was missing. So we saw it physically, we saw it technically, we saw it emotionally across the board. And Sinner, to his credit, did not, there was no sense of panic when he lost the tiebreak. And sure enough, it was one more symbolic moment was Djokovic serving at 1-2 in the 4th, 40 love, thinking and looking like he's going to have an easy hold. He tried a drop shot and Sinner made a great reply off his forehand side, angled away a winner, and came back and broke him to go up 3-1 and really never looked back from there. Djokovic did have him down 15-30 in the last game, but that was about it. I mean, listen, if Novak Djokovic doesn't even reach break point, never mind not breaking serve, not a single break point in the match. I think one deuce game on Jannik's serve. I mean, that's just unheard of for him. And I know Sinner served well. His serve has improved immensely. He now has one of the best serves in the men's game, no doubt about it. But let's compare this, John, to Djokovic and Sinner in their recent collisions. Okay, yeah. Wimbledon, Sinner improved a lot from Wimbledon into the autumn. But then when they played those 3 matches in a 11, 12-day period, the end of the year in Turin and then in the Davis Cup, the round-robin match in Turin went to 7-6 in the third for Jannik. First time he beats Novak. Very good performance on his part. A slightly off-form Djokovic, but a very good win for Jannik, hard-earned. Then Novak beats him handily in the final of that tournament, gets his revenge in the final. That earlier match was the round-robin. Then we go to Turin, and Sinner escaped from 4-5, love 40 in the Davis Cup semifinals, triple match point down, and pulled it out. All just a remarkable effort to salvage that contest. But again, both of those wins were right down to the wire. They were hard-fought, tense, close contests that could have gone either way. This one, of course, Novak was fortunate to be able just to salvage the set, but he was never himself. That he felt like Djokovic, he could tell something was off the first 2 sets. He didn't look like he was feeling great. He said something to that effect. So you could tell that he knew something was off. He was highly professional and just went out and did his job and did it very well, Sinner. But it was surprising. It was surprising. Djokovic said himself, there's a part of him that was shocked, a part of him that wasn't, because he felt like he was never at his best the whole tournament. But obviously he expected to step up for a big semifinal. He was so aware of the history that you alluded to earlier, where he had never lost a semifinal. All 10 times he won the tournament. So in other words, every time he reached the semifinals of the Australian Open, he's always won that match and gone on to win the final. So obviously it's not automatic, but he's been able to, we've just seen it across the board with him at the majors, that when we get down to the home stretch and to the semis and finals of majors, that's when he tends to be able to count on himself. And he was in all 4 Grand Slam finals last year, nearly won them all. Alcaraz managed to beat him in that epic 5-set Wimbledon final, but that was the only one he lost. He won the year-end championships. He's a great big match player, so I think he expected himself to automatically elevate his game because he knew Sinner would be by far the toughest opponent he had faced yet, but it was not to be. So now I think, just to look at it from the standpoint of Sinner, John, it's like this. I think he's primed now. I know you probably first want to talk about Medvedev and Zverev. Let's do that first. Yeah. And I'll give you more thoughts on Sinner for the final.
Do that, yes. Just in quick response to what you said, I mean, I liked how you brought up their 3 meetings at the back end of last year, because this match didn't share many characteristics from that. Whereas those 3 matches, although different in their own rights, kind of did have some things in common. I mean, possibly the first one, which Jannik won in the round robin, is the benchmark in a way, even to some extent for both players. And then certainly Novak took some things from that match and then introduced 1 or 2 more things into the final, and Jannik couldn't live with him. Then the one in the Davis Cup, we saw again, maybe both players were a little bit off it at one point or another, and we didn't quite have them both reaching a peak until the 3rd set, when it did reach a nice crescendo, especially with those 3 match points that Jannik saved. But they did share some characteristics, even if they were all different in their own right. This other match, irrespective of whether it's outdoors, Australia, and 5 sets, just was it looked like 2 different players, and certainly in terms of Novak anyway, just looked unrecognizable from even the one that he lost in the round robin. And as you said, I think no break points in the match. Interestingly, looking back at the Taylor-Fritz match, the Taylor-Fritz match was completely the opposite for Novak. He was having break points and just couldn't convert any of them. I think it was,
and that's different, and that can happen, John. That can happen. Absolutely. He had 15 break points through the first 3 sets. That's right. First 2 sets before he finally broke to go up 2-love in the 3rd. So, yeah, that was exasperating, but you knew he was going to break through sooner or later. Sure enough, those last 2 sets, he broke them 4 times, and it was only a matter of time, and he was working him hard. And Fritz, to his credit, Fritz was terrific on the break points because he relaxed. He said after a certain point, he kind of expected to win them. No, expected to win them only with the thought in his mind that they said he deserves to break me, but I'll just go for it, which he did. He was very
He
aggressive.
did great.
And you're right. I mean, that's totally different when you're constantly reaching. You know, and I've seen that happen to that can happen to Novak as splendid a returner as he is. There are times when maybe he doesn't convert on some of them. He's a little bit cautious, let's say, a little conservative. When the other guy steps up and gets aggressive and takes it away from him, that can happen to even the best. But this was just one. And Sinner serving, I believe, finished at 58% first serves. That's not a tremendous percentage. So Novak wasn't doing much more off the second serve. That's what was so shocking, is that Sinner was up high into the 80s on first serve points won, and then maybe around 65 for second serve points won. So that's just unheard of for Djokovic, and I think that is what put him under so much pressure. Maybe that's why especially in the first two sets, that he played so many bad service games. Is that it was the old syndrome and something he seldom experiences, where somebody is holding so easily and immediately now the burden is back on you to hold because you're getting nowhere on his serve. So that's not a position he's been in many times in his career, but he was yesterday, and I was surprised. But I honestly think his summation in the press conference was pretty accurate. It was not one-sided. He gave Sinner a lot of credit for how well he hit the ball off the ground, the quality of his serving, just the improvement across the board, period. But it definitely was an unrecognizable Djokovic.
Yeah, and he couldn't afford now with the current Jannik Sinner to throw in a performance like that and get away with it, and that's also to Jannik's credit.
So listen, there are a couple of things to add to that. And maybe the reason it caught up to him was, number one, he had the wrist issue prior to the tournament. He lost to Di Minor in the team cup competition, and had to probably take a bunch of days off from practice, and then got back into it. Was still concerned about the wrist in the first few rounds. That did go away, but meantime he had this virus. You could hear it in his voice. I could even hear traces of it in the press conference after the final. I don't think he's totally shaken it. Was it crippling? No, but it just doesn't help when you get two things sort of nagging. First the wrist, then the virus, then a couple of the first two rounds dropping sets surprisingly, then getting into more of a role, then having the tough match with Fritz in the heat, and finally here he was hoping to prime for the semifinals, but feeling like he had never been quite himself the whole tournament. And that was another comment he made in the press conference. So, all of these things came into play.
I still didn't see this coming, though, Steve.
No.
I mean, his run was kind of a classic Novak run to a Grand Slam final. Yes, he dropped a couple of sets in the first couple of rounds. Sure. I mean, I saw him drop sets, at least one last year in Australia, but also I remember in New York against Laszlo Djere. And yeah, it just happens. But then actually, he did begin to purr at times against Manarino, to a lesser extent against Fritz. And it was just looking like a normal Novak run, and that he was peaking at the right time. But it was actually the opposite.
I agree. I don't disagree with that. And he actually didn't play it badly against Fritz. I mean, Fritz played very well, and Djokovic kind of dug a hole for himself at the start of the second set. We let his serve get away. He served a couple of double faults in that game and got behind the break, and then kept squandering, kept missing out on his breakpoint opportunities. But played, I thought, quite well the last two sets. So, yes. No, I'm not saying I saw it coming. I'm saying as he looks back on it, he kind of pieces that together and thinks to himself, I couldn't quite find it the whole tournament. I was almost there. I was getting there. I was getting closer to my best. And normally he doesn't have those doubts. He just expects automatically to meet the moment. He didn't meet the moment yesterday, and that's why you and I are both astonished.
Definitely. Okay, let's switch to the other semi-final before, of course, looking forward to the final itself. The other semi-final is a story on its own as well, with Alexander Zverev taking the first two sets before Medvedev came from behind to win, obviously, in 5. I will say this about this semi-final. A lot of, come from behind 2 sets to love matches you don't see coming at that stage. But there was something about this match that if Medvedev could sort of get his serve sorted in the 3rd set and just stay solid and then get to, say, a tie break, and of course I am looking back retrospectively on this, but then once getting back into the match, there was a strong feeling for me this could go 5, and then, well, I mean, Sasha's stats, by the way, in terms of 5 sets, though very impressive on the one hand, his 2 collapses have both come in the 2 biggest matches of his career, arguably, here today in this semi-final against Medvedev, and of course, just as memorably against Dominic Thiem in the final in 2020. So that's unfortunate timing for him. Give us your rough assessment on that semi-final that we've just seen.
Yeah, I like the fact that you're bringing up the team match. That, of course, was the U.S. Open final in 2020, the COVID U.S. Open with no crowd. And he was storming through that match up 2 sets, looking like he was going to run it out very comfortably and straight. And it all starts getting away from him. He still serves to the match in the 5th. He still loses a very close tiebreaker. That was a heartbreaking loss. Great chance to win his first major there. There were similarities. In this case, Medvedev correctly said, John, that he thought the first set that neither one played that well. I would agree with that. You know, Sasha went up 2 breaks, 4-1, looked like the set was easily going to be his, and led him back. Medvedev managed to get back to 5-all. Sasha served for the set and didn't close him, but managed to break one more time and then squeezed out his last service game after being in trouble there and won at 7-5. It probably should have been a much more comfortable set for Zverev. But then I thought he played quite well in the second. And from 2-1 down, he lost only one more game. He broke Medvedev a couple of times. He was rolling. So we go to the third, and you thought there was a decent chance. That was obviously where he wanted to put the clamps down and not allow Medvedev to get his teeth into the match. But he had one little opening there in the third set, and it was Medvedev was serving at 3-4, love 30. And if Sasha can break him there, he might serve it out. But an ace from Medvedev, he played really well the rest of that game and managed to pull out that service game. And then, of course, they go to the tiebreak. And it was, I never felt like Sasha was going to win that tiebreak in the third set. I just felt like, that Medvedev was a little too good on the big points in the third set tiebreak. But so we go to the fourth, and they're both holding relatively easy. Another moment in the fourth, because Medvedev, again, now it's 4-all Medvedev serving love 30. So again, you feel like if Sasha can break, he can serve out the match. It doesn't happen. Medvedev wins the next point on a bad mistake from Zverev, and then an ace from Medvedev, and he comes back again to hold. And they go into the 4-set breaker. And here another golden opportunity for Zverev, because Medvedev served a double fault, surprisingly, at 4-all to allow Zverev to the match is on his racket. If he can win those 2 points on his serve, it's over. Yeah. Medvedev played a great point to make it 5-all, where you get an inside-out forehand. Surprised to see him go for that shot, too. He doesn't try that shot that often, but moved around his back and hit the inside-out forehand that set up an easy forehand winner. And then that was that moment of, I don't know, fortuitous, whatever you want to call it. Medvedev very, graciously acknowledged his luck, but he decided to move in, as we've seen him do it sometimes in this tournament, as he'd done against Hurkacz, and he played the return from much closer to the baseline. He wasn't in that usual 16 to 18 feet behind the baseline position. So Sasha hit a pretty good first serve, and Medvedev chipped it. And it just kind of crawled over the net. Really short, much shorter than he was aiming, obviously, and Sasha couldn't make the play. And then, so now instead of being match point for Zverev, it's set point for Medvedev, an ace, 4-set over. And I think we all kind of, I'm sure you agreed, going into the fifth, things were looking quite bleak for Zverev. And sure enough, Medvedev breaks him twice and runs out the match 6-3 in the fifth. And Medvedev did a great job, because he got broken those 3 times in the first set, twice in the second, and never again. His serve improved decidedly over the last 3 sets. And Sasha, despite the 78% first serve percentage, which was remarkable, again, following up on 85% against Carlos, he didn't serve well enough in the fifth. And he was understandably dismayed by his predicament. That's how I would put it. He was so frustrated not to have closed it. He knew he had his chances. You know, he was 2 points away several times, and you know, he could have conceivably won it in 3. He had a great chance to win it in 4, and now here he was in a 5th. Physically, I think he was okay.
Yeah.
I think it was state of mind.
Yeah, I've seen compliments. This is after the Hurkacz match, actually, for Medvedev. Actually, some compliments towards the Russian, suggesting that some of the things that he could do and changes into a 5th set, tactical changes, in particular on Tennis Abstract, I was reading, complimenting Medvedev's ability to switch things up, shall we say, and he certainly did so again. I do think that, again, a bit like in the previous match, but for very different reasons, there will be some regrets for Sasha. Big points, some ugly looking shots, you know, volleys at the net on occasions that really he should have been putting away, loose forehands at times in those latter stages on
the forehand
moments.
Yes, the forehand went off. I just do want to make one slight amendment. In the 3rd set tiebreak, it wasn't quite as clear cut as I maybe described it, because it did go to 4-all, but then Medvedev ran off the last 3 points. He got the mini break and took the next 2 points. And so yes, he was 3 points from defeat there, but I never felt he was going to lose that tiebreak. I did think he was going to lose the 4-set tiebreak. But to get back to your point, in the 5th, Zverev's forehand was really vulnerable. We'd seen his forehand better than ever in his match with Carlos. You know, he's feeding off of Alcaraz's pace. And his down-the-line forehand was devastating, and he just wasn't missing much. He was staying aggressive with it, keeping it relatively flat, hardly missing it. In this match, Medvedev is so masterful at not giving him pace. I mean, he knows how to step it up from his own side and become more aggressive when he needs to. But so often he feeds balls to Sasha, daring him to generate his own pace, which is where Sasha can get into a lot of trouble. And in the 5th, I thought the forehand became more and more vulnerable.
Yeah. Okay. So Daniel Medvedev is through to his second Australian. No, I should correct myself there, Steve. His 3rd Australian Open final. His Grand Slam final record, and this does bring us, of course, perfectly towards Sunday. Medvedev's Grand Slam final record is, you know, right now it's not amazing reading, let's say this. I think it's 1 victory and 4 losses.
That's right.
And of course, I do think that if it becomes 2 and 4, you know, we don't really, you know, these things happen in Grand Slam finals, and winning 2 Grand Slams for any player in their career is quite simply stunning. So we don't think about much. But if it does go 1 and 5, we're like, okay, that doesn't make such great reading at the end of your career. So maybe inwardly, both players will feel the tension, but outwardly, maybe there's a bit more pressure on Medvedev going into this final. What do you think?
That's a fair point. I think you're right about that. I think we need to be fair in the sense that when you look at the 1 and 4 record, he's lost 1 Australian Open final to Djokovic, 1 to Nadal. Obviously, the Nadal match, he led 2 sets to love and had a big love 40 opening in the middle of the 3rd to break open the contest, and lost 7-5 in the 5th. I think he always will lament that loss, but great comeback from Rafa, astonishing comeback. So he loses 1. Then at the U.S. Open, same deal. He loses a 5-setter to Rafa, where he came back in 2019 from 2 sets down to take it into a 5th. And then he lost last year to Novak in straight, and Novak was just too good. So obviously he's lost to the 2 icons, you know, 2 times each. That's why one of the reasons why he's 1 and 4. But he should have beaten Nadal in that Australian final a couple of years ago and didn't get the job done. So you're right, though. At some point, you have to step up and beat those great players. So now he's playing Sinner. But what's fascinating about this is here was Daniel 6-0 after Miami last year. He was 6-0 over Sinner. He'd owned him, and then he lost, you know, twice in the fall leading up to the year-end championships, and lost in the semis at Turin. All these matches were really hard-fought, close 3-setters. I mean, one of them was 2 tiebreakers, I guess, and the others were 3-setters. These were great matches and hard-fought and hanging in the balance. But it's not ideal for Daniel because he's come off 3 5-setters, John. He's twice been down 2 sets to love in this tournament. He's already shown us remarkable resilience to get this far and physically to stand up to those tests. But now he plays a guy that's beaten him the last 3 times. All good matches, to be sure, but a guy that's building his confidence up to an all-time high level. And I think the way I would describe Sinner is cocky in the best sense of the word. Cocky in the sense of, I know how good I am. I know what I can do. I'm just going to only worry about giving my 100%, as he said prior to the Djokovic match, and then let the chips fall where they may. I'll do everything I can on my end to make sure I come through. And if Medvedev had been fresher, I wouldn't be quite so certain in my mind, or close to certain, that we're going to be looking at a Sinner victory on Sunday. But I just feel like the combination of how rested and ready Sinner is, despite and having to go forward with Novak, that was his only set that he's dropped in the tournament. And then you have Medvedev with the 3-5 setters and one match finishing at, 3:40 in the morning against Rusevori. So that 5-setter, he was 2 sets down in that one. So I just feel like unless he's somehow able to get on an incredible roll, get off to a fantastic start and win that first set comfortably and start going after him in the second, I mean, if he even splits the first 2 sets, I just don't like it. In the end, I think everything points toward a Sinner victory in 4 sets. If Medvedev is able to prove me and a lot of the other prognosticators wrong, it would end up being one of the great major, I mean, I kind of think about Edberg, you know, at the U.S. Open, 92, you know, 3 times in a row. He's down against Krajicek, he's down against Lendl, he's down against Changa, breaking the 5th against all those guys, and he pulls out the 3-5 setters. Then comes from a set down against Pete Sampras in the final. Alcaraz, when he won the U.S. Open, very similar a couple of years ago, including the match point recovery against Sinner. But if Medvedev were able to come off 3-5 setters against that high caliber opposition and then beat a man who's coming off 3 wins in a row against him and who seems poised to win his first major, it would be just a stunning accomplishment.
Yeah, in those 5 setters, interestingly, that he's had, it's the 4th set in particular where the you know, where I'm thinking about the Rusevori match, a tiebreak 7-6 there, and then also a tiebreak again today. Interesting moments there. I mean, the one against Hurkacz is actually a bit different. He does lose the 4th set there, but he looked like he was struggling physically at the end of the 4th set, and yet he did manage to knuckle down and get it done in the 5th. As you say, time on court, as you said, if they share the first 2 sets, which under normal circumstances you'd think that's fine. I mean, Daniel could do you know, needs to avoid that. The other thing as well is that the 3:40 a.m. one against Rusevori was a while ago. It was 10 days ago. Yeah. And you then go and have a few straight sets after that, fine. But you know, he's 4 sets against Borges. He's one of the things in his interview with Courier that obviously, because there were so many fun things in there and interesting things, but he did just say in that interview, he's like, I'm glad I got it done in 4 because, you know, I could have easily been feeling it in the 5th. And he was feeling it in the 4th. Today he was okay, but we've already touched on the fact that maybe Sasha also could have done a lot more to push him in that 5th set. So, yeah, I am a little concerned physically for him regarding Sunday. And I'm also, I mean, I don't mind laying my cards on the table right now. I'm also leaning towards Sinner. That doesn't mean that I won't be like, you know, completely shocked by a Medvedev win, but I am leaning towards Sinner for a variety of reasons. I'm sure we'll both touch on them in a minute. One thing regarding Jannik, though, there is one thing, is that I don't know if you use this expression in the US, but after the Lord Mayor's show, we say in the UK. In other words, you have that incredible win like he's had against Novak, and sometimes you can then not feel like you've got it done, but actually be a bit flat in the next match. We often see with sports teams and sports men and women as well that they get the unbelievable result in the semi-final, and then actually they can't quite reproduce that in the final. But I think with Jannik and his team and Jannik and his demeanor and his professionalism, I just don't see that Jannik.
You said it right there. That was exactly the word I was going to use. It's the maturity and it's the professionalism. And you could hear it in his interview with Courier after after the win over Djokovic, and he's talked about expecting to play him a few more times this year. It was kind of like, but I'm ready. I want to play him. Not saying it arrogantly, but just like, I believe in myself. I think I can keep getting a lot better. And I think he's going to carry that attitude with him into the final. That's what makes it so interesting, is that, yes, he has to handle the circumstances well. He's got to rise to the occasion. Playing a major final is very different from playing a semifinal, even if the man standing 78 feet across the net happens to be Novak Djokovic. It's still, it's something he hasn't experienced before. His best previous showing was when he lost to Djokovic at Wimbledon in the semis. So I feel like, yeah, maybe that there could be some apprehension because of that, but he's so poised right now. And I feel like now, watching those recent matches, that Daniel gets a little frustrated against him. He's now having a hard time figuring out exactly how does he find the right tactics and strategy to get past Sinner. And like everybody else, he's having to deal with Sinner's improved serve. So I think one key may be, John, that, I mean, Medvedev served so poorly. I touched on it earlier with you. Those first couple of sets, and broken 3 times in the first, twice in the second. That's a lot of times to lose your serve. He'd already lost it 18 times in the tournament prior to that. But then the way he settled down and served those last 3 and pulling out 2 tiebreakers and running it out in the 5th, I was very impressed with the unmistakable improvement in the quality of his serve. And that's going to be, if Daniel's going to have a good chance to win this match, he must serve. He's got to be at peak level efficiency on serve, finding the corners and winning those free points with that first serve. So it's not going to be easy. Sinner's a great returner, but that's going to be one of the keys from Medvedev's end. And I'm intrigued. I think you're giving Daniel a slightly better chance than I'm looking at it. I guess if I was going to say, what would the odds be from my end? I'd give Sinner about somewhere 70% chance to win. And you sound like you're more between 50 and 60, right?
I'm actually closer to 60. I was going to say 60-40. So,
okay.
Steve, you read between the lines pretty well there.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. That's why I love bouncing it off somebody else. And I see your case. I see your point. But I guess I just feel like your concern about coming off the big win, that I think that Cahill is going to be very helpful to Sinner in getting him to understand that, there's one more to go here. And I think Sinner just has this calm sense about him right now, and the understanding that, I'm facing I'm facing the 3rd best player in the world. I'm trying to move past him and take that ranking away from him and start going to the top. But I know how good Daniel is too, and I'm not taking this for granted. The question will be, can he play against Medvedev at the level that he did those last 3 times, which were important occasions, but they weren't Grand Slam finals. So that's what makes it intriguing to me.
Yeah, I was also thinking, funny enough, today, watching Cahill in the box at one point, and I thought, he looks a bit nervous here, and maybe even more nervous than his young charge. But then I also thought to myself, Cahill has been here. He's coached Simona Halep in some of the biggest matches on tour previously, and now he's here with Jannik, taking the Italian into his first Grand Slam final. I also although I'm 60-40, I'm not as big on Jannik's chances as you are, that's for sure. But I also, coming back to Jannik and the temperament of the 3 young charges that we're sort of really honing in on right now. I say honing in on because there have been other young charges in the last few years. Felix in particular springs to mind, but we are really now honing in on these 3 of Rune, Alcaraz, and Sinner. Actually going into their first Grand Slam final, of the 3, when it happens, it's like, I think Jannik's the one I would trust the most. Now, of course, we've seen Carlos get over the hill in those 2 Grand Slam finals that he's won very impressively. And if it was Rune, I just don't know what Rune would turn up in a Grand Slam final right now, at least outwardly. But there's something about Jannik, is that I do think that we'll get a very good Jannik on Sunday, and I think that will be enough to win the match. I do think that Medvedev's experience might come into play. And if this match was 6 months ago, I think a lot of us would be fancying Medvedev's chances so strongly, but it's those last three matches that you touched upon. So, of course, the head-to-head is 6-3 in Medvedev's favor,
Right.
but the last three have all gone the way of the Italian.
Yeah, no, and in that time, he shored up his game so well. The serve much better. I think the backhand is better than ever. Forehand more solid. So I just feel like there were stages in the past where Daniel, in that 6-match streak that he had, he could pick them apart and start coaxing errors, you know, by putting up that brick wall at the back of the court, as he always does. But now it's a lot tougher. There's almost nowhere to go. You just have to play one exhausting point after another and keep forcing him to hit one more ball. But I just don't think he's going to get any of the gifts that he did from Zverev, you know, where Zverev's forehand started to fold and he missed a few easy two-handers here and there. That's not going to happen the way Sinner is striking the ball right now. It's going to take a lot of discipline and determination for Medvedev. And that's why I say that serve is so key, because he's going to have to win, and you know, and that's also conserving energy too. He's just going to have to win some free points, as many free points as possible on serve, and then pick his opportunities to be really aggressive in the rallies. It's a tall order for Medvedev, but I have to say, I didn't know how well he was going to respond to the semifinal after the 5-setter with Hurkacz, and he did a tremendous job to come from 2 sets down. So I'm not going to discount his chances. I just feel like the edge is clearly in Sinner's favor, that this match is going to be largely in his hands.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you there. I also think another thing to be concerned about for Daniil is these double faults. You know, he double faulted 5 times in the first set. To be fair, he got his act in order and barely double faulted for the rest of the match. But that you can't be giving away. You know, you talk about winning 3 points on your serve. You can't be giving away 3 points.
No, and that's why I got that was the key to, especially to the first 2 breaks of serve against him, was the ridiculous, you know, clusters of double faults, 5, as you said, in the set, and they were very costly. No, he can't do that at all, and he's got to be he's got to be really concentrated, disciplined, and understanding that he does not have the luxury, either on serve or off the ground, of giving anything away at all to Jannik. You know, he's got to be at his very best when it comes to that kind of efficiency, and it's not going to be easy. And some of those double faults are inexplicable. You know, it's one thing if Medvedev, we've seen him when he wants to go for, really roll the dice and go for 120 mile or 127 mile an hour second serve ace, and there's always the possibility when you do that, you know, it's not shocking to see a double. But some of these doubles are he's not going for a lot of extra spin or speed, or they're inexplicable to me. And he sometimes seems to discuss it with his coach, and he's trying to figure out himself why it's happening. But they do tend to come in clusters, and it is a problem. You're right. At least the rest of the match after the first set, maybe only 1 more, at most 2 after that first set. So that was impressive.
Only Daniil and to probably a less extent his team will know how he's feeling physically. But if he is feeling okay, and I think that is a big question mark, then I'm pretty optimistic about his chances of at least taking a set, and then from there we don't know. But
I hope so. I hope you're right. I think it would be great. Obviously, we want to see a hard-fought, close match. That's the best thing for the sport. And listen, they're doing a good job with him. They're getting him ready. They're doing something right, his team, in terms of...
He looked okay in that 5th set today.
He did. He did.
Yeah.
Well, and I thought it's just... Earlier, I thought he didn't play his best, but he didn't look beleaguered out there. He didn't look physically spent at any time. And maybe it helped that they're playing at night, but still, that part was impressive. The strong finish was impressive. He has his day off, and maybe he'll be able to convince himself, look, this is the last match. Leave it out here today. You got plenty of time to rest after today. At least you know this is the finish line and there's nothing to follow this one. That can help. But what doesn't help is the level, the caliber of his opposition, and the fact that this is a guy that's now, you know, I believe that Sinner will has a reasonably good chance to finish this year, especially if he takes this title. He's going to be definitely in the running for #1 in the world. He's going to be right, because I think we're going to see him win a lot of titles. Whether he wins another major later in the year, who knows? It's possible, assuming he does win here. But he's certainly going to be, barring injuries, he's going to be winning a lot of titles and going deep into these majors. And he'll play at his age. He can play a lot. So I just feel like he's a clear, authentic contender for #1. And we'll have to see if Carlos can get back into that fight with him and how much Novak wants it. But I do think Sinner is, it wouldn't shock me at all if at the end of 2024 he was ranked #1 in the world.
Yeah, I agree. I think I had one or two doubts about this conversation a few months ago across all the surfaces, grass and clay. But the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm seeing this level, I think he can have a good clay and grass court season. And therefore, yeah, the world is his oyster this year. As I think we've both touched on finally, I think we're both leaning towards Jannik to different degrees for all the reasons that we've highlighted. But if we can get something like those three matches, by the way, were still close. I think it was
they're very close.
2 tie breaks in Beijing and 3 sets in the other 2. So they couple of points here and there could have gone the other way.
Yeah, true. And Sinner played great tie breaks, and Daniel was a little error prone in that one. And it's true. No, they were hanging in the balance, and good match in turn where obviously the crowd support did not hurt Sinner, and Daniel imploded a bit. He started to get into it with a fan at one point, standing by the side of the court, which, by the way, there's been very little of that in this tournament, much more under control, with the exception of tossing his racket toward his chair at the changeover in the Rusevori match when he went down 5-4 in the fourth. That was the only moment where I thought he was maybe imploding a bit. But otherwise, his temperament has been good and strong. And yeah, listen, ideally, I would like to see this match be as close as possible, as you seem to feel too, because that's what the Grand Slam finals are made for. And I hope that Medvedev has it in him. But obviously, those first 2 sets are so critical that at the very least, he gets the split. But ideally, he does even better than that. He's got to really get on top of him early. If he doesn't, it's going to be hard to fashion yet another comeback.
Yeah, I don't see a comeback, and I just think that first set, as you sort of touched on in particular, if he gets his nose in front, then we could be in for a classic. If he gets behind on the scoreboard, and I know he's been up behind in some of his matches this tournament already, but I think coming from behind against a very fresh Jannik has also been nicely pushed. He's just dropped his first set on Rube, but that Rublev match made him pretty battle-hardened as well, because that could easily have been 4 or 5 sets. There were really 3 very close sets with Rublev having chances against Jannik. So I think Jannik has got a nice level of being battle-hardened, and he's been improving, and obviously each time he's having to play a higher caliber opponent. So I think that should work.
You touched just a brief comment on the Rublev match. You're so right. Khachanov was also well played, hard fought, but Rublev, of course, had 5-1 in the tiebreak in the second to make it 1 set all, and didn't win another point. And that was another impressive display of poise under pressure, because Sinner just wouldn't let go at that stage, and he knew the importance of going up 2 sets to love. So yeah, and 8 break points against him in that match, he saved them all. So any question he's been asked in this tournament, he's answered it and then some. So looking forward to that final, John.
Yeah. Me too, Steve. Once again, a big thank you for coming on again so soon. Fingers crossed we catch up again later on in the year, maybe across another slam. Steve, actually, I see that you're looking at the background. I can see you're not in Oz. Do you often go to Australia, or you've been there many times in the past?
I've been there a couple of times. There in 16 and 17. I've been to the other majors a lot more. I really enjoyed it in 16 and 17. Saw Djokovic win in 16, and saw the classic Roger Rafa final in 2017 where Federer came from 3-1 down in the 5th to win it. And I'm not there this year. I miss it, but I'm glad I saw those 2, and I've done about 40 French and over 50 Wimbledons, and same with the US, but have not been able for a variety of reasons, have not been able to get to Australia as often.
I mean, it's a tricky one. All right, Steve, big thanks for coming on today, and we'll speak to you soon.
Okay, thanks for having me, John.